Do you guys remember Space Cases? It was a show that was on Nickelodeon for a hot minute in the mid-90s. It was basically like Star Trek for middle schoolers, and I remember being totally obsessed with it. Spaceships, androids, the occasional angsty episode. It popped back into my head recently, and after spending way too long trying to remember what it was even called, I finally managed to track it down. I rewatched the whole series, and I am now making this video in the hopes that it may reawaken the deeply buried, possibly repressed memories of other 90s kids who tuned in and caught this frankly amazing Saturday night extravaganza before it met its untimely end. So strap in for the next little bit while I take us through it. In 1993, kids channel Nickelodeon wanted to boldly go where it hadn't really gone before, outer space. Sure, Nick had slime, sketch comedy, game shows, and pure chaotic energy, but prestige science fiction with lore and world building and moral dilemmas was new territory. They soon commissioned TV heavyweights Peter David and Bill Mumy to create an epic series that could run for several seasons but still fit into a kids show budget. The pair came up with a concept that was deceptively simple yet wildly ambitious. What if a group of misfit students at an elite interplanetary space academy snuck onto a mysterious alien vessel and accidentally launched themselves across the galaxy? With a return journey back home set to take 7 whole years to complete, a skeleton crew of 5 kids, 2 grown-ups, and a half-broken android set out on an odyssey across the stars. It was a frankly genius framing device. You get the structure of a Star Trek-style exploration show with new planets, new species, new weekly moral quandaries, but filtered through the eyes of middle schoolers. Nickelodeon greenlit the project, and Space Cases was born.
Engines are online.
Gentlemen, set course for home.
Not a problem. Now, how do you do that again?
Despite being an American network show, Space Cases was actually produced in Canada with a half-Canadian, half-American cast and crew to qualify for much-needed tax breaks. These were the days long before multi-million-dollar TV episodes. The production team was operating on a shoestring budget, and they did anything that they could to save money, often borrowing props from other Nickelodeon shows when they weren't in use, and piecing together the show's costumes and sets from stuff bought in regular retail stores. Yes, I see those CDs hot glued to the side of that chair. It's the future. This scrappy, low-budget charm was part of Space Case's DNA and added to the show's quirky character. Featuring an eclectic cast of young actors, American and Canadian, many of whom were complete newcomers to TV, alongside a few experienced sci-fi veterans for credibility and production stability, the result was a team that felt appropriately awkward yet earnest that grew into their roles as the series progressed. Let's meet the players. First, team leader Harlan Band, played by none other than Walter Emmanuel Jones, whom many 90s kids already knew as the original Black Ranger from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. A stock human from Earth, Harlan is your typical brave but headstrong hero. As the theme song summarizes, leaping before he looks, his general impulsiveness gets the crew into trouble just as often as it saves them. Harlan's also got a big chip on his shoulder. His father died in an intergalactic war, so he harbors serious prejudice against Andromedans, leading to immediate friction with one of his crewmates, Radu 386, a teen Andromedan who is actually the total opposite of what Harlan expects. He's gentle, sweet-natured, and a bit shy despite his super strength. Andromedans in the Space Cases universe are notable for their big ears and super hearing. Naturally, Harlan distrusts him at first due to that human Andromedan bad blood, but over time, they develop a kind of brotherly friendship. We also have Catalina, a quirky girl from Titan, Saturn's moon. Cat is the ship's main engineer with spunky energy and comedic timing. Her people have a wild trait, supersonic screams, that can literally blast things around in the event of emergency. Catalina is imaginative, occasionally spacey, not least because she spends half of her time talking to an invisible friend named Susie that nobody else can see. Fun fact, Catalina's actress Jewel State, who was about 13 years old during filming, would later become well known to sci-fi fans on shows like Firefly and Stargate Atlantis. But Space Cases is where she got her start, complete with a terrible yet terribly adorable rainbow wig that 6-year-old Austin really found enchanting for some reason. Then there's Bova, hailing from Uranus. Yes, cue the inevitable Nickelodeon jokes. Bova is the pessimistic one of the group, a dour, cynical boy who expects the worst at all times. Pretty much the Eeyore of the group, always grumbling about everything that's happening. You'll note that his species has a small biochemical lightning rod organ on their forehead, so Bova can conduct electricity and even generate powerful lightning beams whenever needed. The last kid is Rosie Ioni, a bubbly girl from Mercury. Rosie is the team's eternal optimist. Mercurians, being from the closest planet to the sun, are all about the warm touch in a literal sense. She can ignite objects with her fingertips and withstand scalding temperatures, making her a vital asset to the team when things get too hot to handle. The 5 kids happen to be in detention when a derelict ship shows up at Star Academy. Harlan goads the group to board the vessel to look around. They soon discover it's called the Krista, a sort of organic living ship, who quickly bonds with the kids once they touch the controls, locking the vessel specifically to their DNA pattern. Of course, they are soon followed aboard by 2 grown-ups, their teacher, Miss Davenport, the school's vice principal, a strict, prissy, and by-the-book authority figure, as well as Commander Seth Goddard, who is basically a Captain Kirk-like action hero. After some Scooby-Doo slapstick shenanigans, the ship takes off from the academy with the kids and grown-ups on board. The crew meets Thelma, the ship's malfunctioning android assistant, who will act as the story's main expositor and the general glue holding the whole show together. She's great. I love her. Best performance in the entire show by a country mile.
Hi. I'm Harlan Band.
Hello, Harlan Band. I am Thelma.
Anywho, after the series opener, the Krista takes off and falls into a spatial rift, a kind of wormhole that spits everyone out on the other side of the galaxy. By the time the ship stabilizes, they are light years away from home and grimly calculate that it will take a little over 7 years to return home at top speed. Welcome to your new life, kiddos. Commander Goddard and Miss Davenport are compelled to try and take over the situation, but with the Krista's controls locked to the kids' biological imprint, there's not much that they can do besides trying to give the kids a sense of normalcy, with Davenport acting as their teacher and the commander taking the lead for the journey back home. So, 1 episode in, the stage is set, an unlikely crew, a wondrous, if temperamental ship, and a whole universe of possibilities in this relatively unexplored 23rd century story. Series creator Bill Mumy pitched Nickelodeon an entire 5-season-long series arc that would detail the kids coming of age in their race back home, adventuring through a galaxy at war. The show would feature all the trappings you'd expect, both comedic and dramatic, with interpersonal relationships that would evolve throughout the story. And while it was one of the more expensive shows for Nickelodeon to produce, remember, that didn't really mean a whole lot back in the 90s, because the baseline budget for these live-action shows back then was like peanuts anyway. Still, Space Cases was notable for being one of the very first kids shows to lean heavily into things like CGI, featuring occasional space battles and set extensions to make the series' main location, the Krista, come alive. On screen, the Krista was presented as this enormous space cruiser full of glowing panels and curved architecture. On the show, its rooms are connected via a travel tube system that ran throughout the whole vessel, which characters could hop into and be whisked to and fro. In reality, this is because the production basically just had a single set, a hallway that they absolutely redressed, relit, and re-angled within an inch of its life, swapping out different wall panels, using different lighting gels, rolling different low-budget computer consoles in and out to give the illusion that they had more than one set. Kids watching at home, of course, didn't notice this, but it is kind of fun as a grown-up to imagine these actors leaping down a travel tube, the director calling cut, the camera then being moved to a new angle, the lights and tables being shifted slightly, and boom, new location unlocked. And in a weird way, it kind of works. The show's first season basically takes place entirely inside the Krista, giving Space Cases a cohesive visual identity. There's something very charming about how hard the production committed to selling this large-scale story with so few resources. Once you look past the rough edges, what you see is a surprisingly ambitious, serialized sci-fi story that can be enjoyed by the whole family. The show was not just Monster of the Week in space. It had actual arcs, like it covered surprisingly mature themes: prejudice, war, interplanetary politics, friendship, betrayal, middle school crushes, moral dilemmas, and so much more. As the kids travel through space, they get caught up in conflict against the Spung, a race of reptilian warriors, basically discount Klingons. Leading the charge is villain Warlord Shank, a snarling space pirate played by none other than Star Trek icon George Takei in gloriously over-the-top fashion. The character's daughter, Elmira, has defected from the Spung and joins up with our heroes from time to time, setting up a recurring arc that plays throughout the entire series. There are goofy cameos from all kinds of folks, even Mark Hamill pops up in an episode. The 90s were a wild time. Rewatching Space Cases was quite the trip. I was genuinely impressed with the performances of basically everybody involved in the show. Walter Emmanuel Jones, fresh off his stint with Power Rangers, had a lot to prove in this, and he basically knocked it out of the park. I will go on record saying that I believe Jones has actually been one of the most underutilized actors of this era. To this day, he should be getting tons of roles, and I promise you, if I ever finally manage to become a big director myself, he will. Next to Thelma, the character Catalina practically carries the entire first season, and I'm not just saying that because young Austin had a huge crush on her. When you actually watch this show back, you realize that without her character, it would just be a much weaker story. I also want to give a shout out to the two grown-ups, Goddard and Davenport. I was impressed by how both of them do a really great job of straddling that line between being the opposing authority figure, yet not being too overbearing or cliche for kids' television. There were plenty of opportunities for this show to lean a bit too heavily into the typical Nickelodeon tropes, but it doesn't. They address actual important moral and ethical topics, all while avoiding things like on-screen violence. They even tiptoed around having legit love triangles, which was kind of risky business in 90s family programming. But upon rewatching, as fun as this show could be, it wasn't without its criticisms. By the end of the first season, the character of Catalina had to be written out of the show when actress Jewel Staite signed a deal with Disney, and the character was replaced with Catalina's invisible friend Susie. If you weren't there for it, you guys have no idea how much that twist rocked the world of Nickelodeon fans. By the time season 2 rolled around, the show got a bump in budget, allowing for a bigger set. They finally left the Krista, sort of. But when Goddard and Davenport's screen time had to be reduced due to mitigating circumstances, and the departure of Catalina, the unexpected dynamic shift of this fluctuating cast meant that the rhythm established in season 1 couldn't ever quite be recaptured. The show still worked, sure, but with episodes getting more expensive to make, viewership numbers needed to keep pace, and they simply didn't. At least not as quickly as the network wanted. See, behind the scenes, things weren't exactly stacked in its favor. Nickelodeon seemed to almost despise the show, shuffling its time slot repeatedly, preempting episodes for weeks at a time, and in a move that feels almost mythic in its absurdity, they aired the season 2 finale opposite the Super Bowl, which is a great way to make sure that nobody watches it. The season's biggest episode, featuring George Takei, received no meaningful promotion, no advertising push, no standard rerun the following week. It was essentially dropped into a ratings black hole and left there. Series co-creator Peter David later explained that while the ratings for the show were okay, they weren't explosive, and Nickelodeon was not interested in waiting around to see if things would pick up. The thing with a lot of these successful sci-fi shows is that they took a while to gain their rabid fan bases. Shows like The X-Files and Babylon 5 took time to grow, but Space Cases was never given that runway. Nickelodeon's target demographic was narrowly focused on 6 to 11-year-olds, and unlike traditional sci-fi networks, they weren't trying to get older viewers or even merchandising revenue to offset modest ratings. So there was no Space Cases toy line, no organized push for things like t-shirts or collectibles, pretty much no Space Cases merch at all, apart from, I don't know, stickers. Which, I mean, come on. To make matters more frustrating, several publicity-building stunts were reportedly pitched to the network, crossovers, guest stars, buzzy cameo appearances, but most were declined. The network simply did not see the value in trying to appeal to adult sci-fi fans who might have actually watched the show alongside their kids. Nickelodeon producers' strategy was very simple. If it was not a breakout hit within its core demographic, then it would not be sustainable. So, by March of 1997, after just 2 seasons of slow but steady fan growth, complete with early internet fan sites and even award nominations, Nickelodeon made the call and pulled the plug, canceling the show and leaving the Krista's 7-year journey incomplete. Space Cases remains, for many folks, the show that got away. What would it have looked like to watch the story unfold as it was originally intended? Suppose Nickelodeon had signed all of the actors to exclusive contracts from the get-go, had made marketing the show a higher priority, had rolled the dice on a 3rd season. We'll never know. But one thing I do know is that this story does not have to end on a sad note. No, a silver lining could be found at Paramount. The ever-shifting corporate constellation of the 2020s has now left the rights and ownership of the old Nickelodeon shows to the Paramount Media Network, and it's to them that I will now issue this challenge. Despite being a beloved 90s television program, the Nickelodeon network never released Space Cases to home video. No VHS tapes, no DVD box sets, no streaming. The only way to watch this show now is to find bootleg copies of it online that somebody taped with their VCR back in the 1990s. This is whack. It's a fun show. It would make a ton of folks happy to watch it again. I'm not asking you guys to produce another season. I'm not asking for a reboot. I am not asking for a legacy sequel. All I'm asking is that somebody at Paramount go into the Nickelodeon archives, find the Space Cases master tapes, digitize them, and put the show onto your streaming service. I know the magic of the internet. I know that somebody out there watching this video right now can get this video in front of somebody at Paramount, and they can make this happen. So please share this video far and wide until that somebody is found. Far too often, beloved movies and shows get swallowed up by the vacuum of corporate reshuffles, rights to different programs change hands, libraries get consolidated, exclusives get abandoned, and suddenly a show that could have meant the world to a generation is just gone. Nobody can watch it anymore. Not because anybody hated it, not because it failed spectacularly, just because there's a show that gets lost in the paperwork of a merger. I loved watching Space Cases so much that I decided to make an extended cut of this video where I review the entirety of Space Cases episode by episode. That's right, you too can sit and listen to me ramble about this show for a whole hour, and hey, you won't have to watch a single ad doing so because it is available on Nebula. Unlike the world of corporate conglomerates, Nebula is a creator-owned streaming service where the people actually making the videos have a real stake in where they live, how they're presented, and whether they stay accessible to future generations. It's a platform that is built to keep great projects from drifting off into the same kind of archival limbo that Space Cases now finds itself in. Just visit go.nebula.tv/Austin McConnell or use the QR code on screen to sign up, and you'll be able to watch entertaining exclusives, Nebula originals, early uploads, and more. This month, they're running a special deal offering a whole year of access for just $30. Scan the code or check out the links below.